As chairman of the IHRA, it's my great honor and privilege to introduce our next speaker, Lord Pickles. You will have all seen his impressive bio in the program, and I don't intend to repeat all that. But let me emphasize just a couple of his main roles. Firstly, Lord Pickles has been the UK's Special Envoy for post-Holocaust issues for over 6 years, succeeding Sir Andrew Burns, who was the inaugural office holder. The IHRA played a leading part in proposing the role to UK government internationally on a range of Holocaust-related subjects and topics. Secondly, and in part connected to that role, Lord Pickles is head of the UK delegation to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, known as IHRA. And it was specifically at his instigation that the UK became the first country to adopt the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism, which has subsequently gained so much attention, both domestically and abroad. Above all, Eric Pickles is the kind of politician I wish the current crop could aspire to. Straightforward, honest, and direct. He tells you as it is. And I'm sure his electorate in Brentwood and Ongar, where he was MP for 25 years, loved him. Maybe it was the Yorkshire in him coming out. And all of us at IHRA have a deep affection for Eric's loyalty and friendship to us. In these virtual days, I greatly miss bumping into Eric at so many IHRA occasions, which he never missed. We can't go on meeting like this, we often said to each other. Well, let's hope we will again in the future. We're delighted that you have agreed, as ever, to speak to us today. So over to you, Eric.
Fantastic to be here, and I look forward to bumping into old chums on a very regular basis. And it's, you know, we're just getting that position where we can. Well, I join you today from the Conservative Party conference in Manchester, and I'm speaking from my hotel bedroom. And I've actually got a great view looking across, because I'm able to kind of judge the weather, because I can just see, it's possible to see the Pennines. And if you can't see the Pennines, then it's raining. But if you can see the Pennines, it's about to rain. And I can tell you, I cannot see the Pennines, and it is raining in absolute buckets, and it does not stop raining since I arrived. So I'm sorry I won't be with you tomorrow. Well, 80 years not out. Who would have thought it? I dare say the people that originally put together the association never really believed that 80 years on it'd still be going. But in a way, it's just as relevant, and it's become, I think, an enormously important part of the fabric of British of our voluntary organisations, and it's a place that has an enormous authority on social issues. The support that the IHRA provides to Holocaust remembrance and to education ensures that the memory of those founders and current members is at the very heart of all initiative. What I thought I would do is just say a little bit about my role as Special Envoy, and say a little bit about the new memorial. I mean, a key part of my role as Special Envoy is to be the head of the delegation to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, IHRA. And as you say, we were the first country in the world to adopt the working definition. And it's always a matter of pride that I can slightly needle my Israeli friends, as we managed to pip them to the post by just a week in its adoption. But it's more than just the anti-Semitism definition. In 2013, we adopted a definition to deal with Holocaust definition and distortion. And we've also got last year we did a working definition of anti-Roma discrimination. And just as importantly, we produced some very good guidelines in the teaching and learning about the Holocaust. I want to be able to talk a little bit about, if it wasn't really for the two key players, Michael Newman and Alex Morse, we wouldn't be as effective a delegation as we are. I mean, both Michael and Alex are really respected right across the international delegates that come, and are a constant source of information, guidance, and occasionally are a very soothing voice in troubled times. IHRA creation was created by the Stockholm Declaration, which set up the designation of Holocaust Remembrance Day. And it's 21 years since that happened. We were going to have a celebration and a renewal of the Stockholm Declaration last year, but COVID got in the way. So this year we're meeting in Malmö, and the idea is for each country to make a series of clear pledges in terms of Holocaust education, Holocaust remembrance, and we've got a whole draft of recommendations, which, as you say, played an enormously important part in putting them together, and we'll be unveiling those in the coming days. But we have ensured that there'll be something there to ensure clear remembrance, and also to ensure that we teach future generations to understand what happened. In addition to the focus of my work on safe, it's also about safeguarding the record. The government has received finally permission from the planning inspector to build a memorial and learning centre right next to Parliament, and the construction of that building and a monument will start very soon indeed. It's going to be very important to ensure, at a time when there are lots of memorials going up right across Europe, that sometimes seek to distort history, sometimes seek to play down some of the collaborative elements, sometimes tries to pretend that the Holocaust was Holocaust by the Nazis. It's important that we tell the truth, and we're determined to ensure that it will be a warts and all learning centre. So, for example, we'll show enormous pride in talking about the kinder transport, but we'll make sure that it's understood that the British government didn't organise the kinder transport; it entirely came from volunteers. And we will also point out that it's called kinder because we wouldn't let the children's parents into Great Britain to give them safe harbour. It was my privilege in Belarus a couple of years ago to lay a wreath of commemoration at the death centre Maritaskanet, where a considerable number of the parents of the young children that came to Britain were murdered. We'll also ensure that we won't shy away from the white paper that ensured that Jewish people weren't able to go to Palestine in that critical period before and after the Second World War. A dreadful paper which I'm pleased that when our Foreign Secretary made a public apology to, which I think is important. We're not going to shy away from the internment of particularly German Jewish refugees who found themselves next to Nazis in places like the Isle of Man. So we will ensure that it's properly balanced and properly understood, so that we'll be a shining example of the truth. I'll happily answer any questions that folks have got about the Memorial and Learning Centre. But I should also say that one of my responsibilities before we do that is about restitution. And obviously, there's been a series of enormous disappointments with regard to the attitude of the Polish government. And Poland is obviously massively important. It was the handle of the Holocaust, and but it's also the custodian of the Holocaust. And I mean, to a large degree, the Poles have done a magnificent job in preserving sites and ensuring that the memory is there. But their reluctance, the only European country that doesn't have a compensation, their reluctance to embrace it, I think is deeply worrying. I, along with my American colleagues from the Netherlands, Israel, and other members of IHRA have been pressing very hard for some changes, and you will have seen the disappointing news of just a few weeks ago. However, we're not going to go away. There is a Terezin conference next year in September, and Poland will be attending that. And we're looking to find ways in which we can get some kind of proper, reasonable compensation scheme. And that's something that I certainly will be working on for the next year, and be a major objective in trying to deal with that. So I'm looking forward to the Czech Republic's conference on the Terezin Declaration next year. I mean, before I close and we go to questions, I just want to emphasize how massively important the Association of Jewish Refugees is in the work that I do. It's not just the people that I know, but it has a status and a focus that when it speaks, people tend to stop and listen to what it has to say. So it's great to be with you. Could I apologize for my voice? I'm at the tail end of this dreadful cold that seems to have affected a lot of people. You know, I'm double jabbed. I've also had a flu jab, but there isn't a jab against the common cold. But I think I have the voice now that I might be able to advertise lager, probably the best voice possible. So, my dear friends, I'm very happy to answer any questions that you've got.
Hello, Lord Pickles. It's Alex. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining us from Conservative Party conference. Sounds like I thought you were maybe just having too much fun there, but good to hear it's just the common cold that's the cause of your raspy voice. But thank you for sharing your work with our audience today. I thought I might jump in with just the first question. So the theme of this conference, this two-day conference, is about connecting next generations. So we are hearing all sorts of voices from the second, third, fourth generations. And I guess, you talk very well about what your role as Special Envoy for Post-Holocaust issues involves. I'm wondering, could you talk a little bit about to what extent do the voices, do the experiences, do the needs of the second, third, and fourth generations enter into that work that you do, whether it be, as the head of the IHRA, the UK IHRA delegation, whether it be, as co-chair of the memorial, the work that you do on restitution, where does these next generations factor into that work?
In a kind of strange thing, Alex, if we've been having this conversation, I don't know, say 30 years ago, there would have been a kind of a working assumption that there would be a point at which the Holocaust would just simply go into the history books, and there would be a kind of determined view of it. And in a way, the Holocaust is just as alive in terms of a political idea and a political argument as it was 70 odd years ago. So in terms of recognizing that the final stage of any Holocaust or any genocide is denial, I think we're kind of in that phase. And I've come to, I've talked to you about this a lot, but I've come to the view that Holocaust denial isn't as big a problem as Holocaust distortion. And I think we've seen some really dreadful examples in the Czech Republic and in Texas of anti-vaxxers using the yellow star, or even vaguely suggesting that taking a COVID vaccine is somehow the equivalent of what happened in the genocide. And the second aspect, which we've talked about, is I think that we are moving into a callous age of indifference, where the sheer numbers mean that you start to equate the number of people who were murdered by the Nazis, the number of people who died in a Black Death, or number of people who died in various wars. And it's our job to ensure that the 6 million plus the other victims of the Nazis are not seen as a statistic. You will recall that Stalin, the great humanitarian, said that one death was a tragedy, but 1 million deaths was just a statistic. Our job is to put faces on people. Our job is to put location in people's minds. Our job is to ensure that people really understand that the folks who died in the Holocaust were just like you and me. They had aspirations. They were making plans to the future. I'm often struck by these. We put on quite a bit of money in terms of restoring the shoes. And if you look at them, they're very similar to the kind of shoes that most of us wear. And those shoes weren't designed to go on a death march. They were meant to pick children from school. They were meant to go on a date. They were meant to go to the cinema. They're meant to be worn at a graduation. And I think that's partly the problem of Poland, in a way, that the heart was completely sucked out of Poland by the sheer number of the population that was locked. And in a way, the heart was sucked out of Europe, and it's part of our job to put the heart back in, but to put the memory there. A bit complicated, really. You get the idea.
I do. Thank you. I'm wondering. We heard some very interesting examples earlier today of second generation programs that involve or second or third generation speakers going into schools and sharing testimony. And there's a whole emerging field about what does this even look like educationally? How is what evidence can we find to support how it can best be done? I'm curious, in your role, you have this unique perspective because you get to look at what goes on in the UK and in so many other countries as well. Are you aware of any countries that are doing a particularly noteworthy job in terms of, these sorts of programs, ensuring that the children and grandchildren of survivors are also sharing their stories? Is that something that you've come across at all?
Yeah, I've come across it in France, and I've certainly come across it in Germany. I mean, it's not without risks. The thing about Holocaust distortion is the distorters can, well, by the nature of things, can tell as many lies as they like. But we have to be 100% accurate. So we've got to really ensure that when we do that, that it's a faithful representation of what happened. And there is no, in the words of Alistair Campbell, no sexing up, no, just slightly to make it a better story. It's got to be the absolute bare bones of the process. And that's something I'm really keen for us to explore. I mean, we've had a number of examples where people's memory just, it's not that they're lying, it's just that the memory is just slightly different to what happened. So it's a big responsibility. But I think it goes beyond just people going into schools to do this. I think it's about carrying, in a way, a proud tradition forward. And I think it's about understanding that actually pretty large, a surprisingly large number of our population of British citizens have a connection to the Holocaust. I mean, one thing, incident that we're doing, Alex, is there's no memorial at all to British citizens, people who were at the beginning of the war, British citizens who were murdered in the death camps. And we've managed to get a fair number of those, and we will be ensuring that their names are remembered.
That's brilliant. I speaking of memorials, the Westminster Memorial that you referred to, I know that there were, all kinds of calls for input into what that might consist of. I'm wondering, to what extent were the sort of children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of survivors sort of vocal in that process? Was there a lot of input at all from people who had a family connection, and did that enter into the thinking of what the memorial should consist of?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the commission organized a series of meetings, and just before the whole process started, there was a massive meeting of survivors in Wembley, which set out a process of consultation. And also, because there was a competition for the design, that went round all the major centres of the United Kingdom. But the idea, but to ensure there needs to be something there that says, we are going to remember. You are not going to be, your message is going to be strong. And I hope that would also does apply to children of survivors, to grandchildren of survivors, and that we retain the authentic nature of the memory. And it'd be a place to kind of understand that we regarded their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents as important people.
Mm. That's great. Just, wondering about, are there any other sort of reassurances or, anything for these people? There's so many of the second and third generation who are with us today are, they are just concerned that their parents, their grandparents' stories will be forgotten. I mean, you've done a very good job of saying that, one of the the reasons that we mustn't forget is because of Holocaust denial and distortion. But in terms of, just education and preserving testimony, is there anything else in your work that you could just talk about by way of just letting people know about the ways in which, your role and the folks that you work with? I know Sally Seeley, I think, is with us here today. And hello, Sally, who does such amazing work on behalf of so many of us in this sector, are helping to preserve just the stories, the testimonies, and ensuring that education does continue. Is there anything you can sort of let them know about in terms of the government's involvement in that?
Well, of course. Well, I mean, we're going to make a series of pledges, and for the government, Holocaust educations remain pretty central to what we do. It's the only subject that's compulsory on the national curriculum. The ensuring that 2 senior pupils from secondary schools go to Auschwitz each year. Obviously, that's been suspended because of COVID. Is important. We're doing some outreach work with Belsen, and a close great work of UCL in terms of teaching the Holocaust. And as you know very well, we had a pretty big input into the teaching document that IHRA put together. I mean, keeping it alive, keeping those stories alive, keeping an understanding about the basic humanity of the victims and the survivors is something that is completely central to my art, and also to my co-chair, Ed. It's what the process is about. And I think we should also understand that the memorial is just part, and the Learning Centre is just part. There will be a website, there will be a digital dimension, and that is a way in which we're going to store information. And just as important, we're going to cooperate with Yad Vashem, cooperate with America, cooperate with Berlin, cooperate with Auschwitz to ensure that we're all ensuring that the truth is out there.
That's brilliant. Lord Pickles, thank you so much. I can't, it would be irresponsible of me to tax your voice any more than we've already done. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise. On behalf of, as a member of the UK IHRA delegation, thank you for all the work that you do leading our delegation. And I think I speak on behalf of so many AJR members and others who are joining us today, thanking you for your tireless work. We've had some really nice comments here coming through, just saying something to this extent about, you're such an effective advocate for the issue that is so central to so many of us. And so thank you for all the work that you do, as I mentioned, in restitution, with the memorial, at being an international spokesperson on behalf of all that's going on in the UK on these issues. So thank you. And thank you for joining us today. It's been a very interesting talk indeed.